Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face.
Well, welcome back to Face to Face. Thanks for joining us for another interview and another Hot Docs interview, a film by the name of Theater of Violence. Hope you're going to get down to Hot Docs to check it out, hotdocs.ca. Look them up online. And I had the pleasure of chatting with Emile Langbaal and Lucas Canapa, their new film called Theater of Violence. And it's a incredibly moving film, an incredibly compelling film. It's a story of a Ugandan, Dominic Ongwen. He was the first, is the first former child soldier ever to be indicted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, for war crimes. And Ongwen was abducted at the age of 9 by Joseph Kony. Some of you may remember the Lord's Resistance Army. They are still a thing. And we're talking about forced detention and brainwashed and to perpetrate these violent crimes that Dominic's ultimately charged with. And it raises some deep questions about a lot of things. This isn't just a philosophical film. This isn't just a legal piece, an exercise, academically. This really does have many questions and many insights for us all. We talk about the argument of nature versus nurture, and what does oppression actually look like in a community context, in a family context, maybe and also in a governmental context as well. We talk about restorative justice and about context and about so many assumptions that are made about African, and in this case Ugandan, and in even northern Ugandan culture, and what are the implications of that? Where do we wind up when we make these global assumptions about other people and other cultures? And instead of saying, hang on a second here, we need to step back and we need to listen a little more closely. We need to ask some better questions, and then maybe make an assessment of one kind or another, all the while hopefully building relationship along the way. We talk about Christianity's role in this conflict, and we talk about what amnesty actually means, and radicalization, and this whole notion of how retributive judgment is really, and punishment is really not working. Fascinating film, fascinating conversation. Just absolutely thrilled to have Emile and Lucas on the show on Face to Face here, celebrating their film Theater of Violence. It is I believe, the North American premiere of the film in the special presentation section at Hot Docs. So look for it as well. Post Hot Docs online and search for it, and hopefully you'll be seeing it on a video on demand platform in the not so distant future. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and my speaking. You can get a copy of Real Change is Incremental there. And if you're listening to the podcast on YouTube or on your favorite channel, please subscribe to the channel, or to Face to Face on the channel or on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. Please leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. So if you head to my site, davidpecklive.com or facetofacelive.ca, it'll bring you to the same place, and you'll be able to access lots of information about what I'm up to, but also, more importantly, the conversations that I've been publishing over the last, it's coming up on 10 years. Can you believe that? That's just crazy talk. Over 600 published interviews online and many more on YouTube. You can find them many places, but mostly it's at facetofacelive.ca, and that'll get you to your player of choice. Please leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for your support and for listening. But stay tuned for my conversation with Emile Langbaal and Lucas Canapa talking about their new film, Theater of Violence. Well, welcome to Face to Face, and welcome to Hot Docs 2023. We are joined by two very special guests here today. We have Emile Langbaal and Lucas Canapa here with us to talk about their new film, their difficult, compelling, and beautiful new film, Theater of Violence. Thank you to you both for joining us here today on the show.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
for
us.
having us.
Yeah, it really is. Always, I always take it as a real privilege. I love, as my listeners know, I love a good conversation, even if it's not being recorded. And the beauty of putting these things down and on record is that I hope people can go back to them and peel back layers. And it seems to me it's a different kind of storytelling, having a great conversation. And thank you for a great film. I mean, congratulations on the film. It really is brilliant and very, very challenging in so many ways. And grand jury prize winner at Movies That Matter. So congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So thanks again for joining me today. I wonder if one of you could just sort of, Emil or Lucas, step in and just give us a little bit of an overview. We'll try not to, spoil, I suppose, the film in a sense, but a lot of this is history that's been going on for many, many years. Can one of you, Emil, give us an overview of theater of violence as we step into this conversation?
So the film is about a trial in the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And the guy on trial is this former child soldier called Dominic Ongwen. He was 9 years old when he was kidnapped in the northern Uganda and indoctrinated and turned into a soldier. And now, many years later, he's in his 40s and he is tried at the court for the same crimes that were committed against himself, basically. So it's about many questions, but I guess one of the big questions that we're asking is he a victim or a perpetrator or both? And how do we deal with a man like Dominic Ongwen?
Well, and the thing it seems to me too, Emil, is that this is so not just a one-off. I mean, history has shown us that this is, you have the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, you have Rwanda. There's so many pieces of our very recent history where I guess lessons learned from a trial like this, from a film like this, are just kind of lurking there on the surface, but also as you go a little deeper. Lucas, I mean, when you guys stepped into this story, into this, maybe you didn't even know if there was a film there when you started, but what were some of the questions you were asking when you stepped in, when you first started principal photography?
We got interested in this project when we read about the beginning of the trial. And both Emil and I, we went to Uganda before with other projects. So we heard about the story of the LRA and we heard about Dominic Ongwen. And when the trial started, we knew that actually we have a film because it was like a perfect structure to delve into all these issues we were interested in. And one of the questions that was fascinating to us is this nurture versus nature question, because
Right.
Dominic was only 9 years old when he was abducted. And we know that he became one of the commanders of the same army that abducted him. So we were interested in this transition from this innocent boy, do we have moral compass? How does this evil is born in someone? So these were issues that were interesting for us. But other than that, of course, the main issue, how to do justice in this situation, how to bring justice to Dominic Ongwen, who was himself a victim, and how to bring justice to all these victims he hurt. And that these were the main areas that we were trying to explore.
I think for me, my background academically is film and philosophy, and so I've spent years asking some of these sort of existential questions about what is a person, what makes a human being, when do we actually start being, as the existentialists, the French and the German existentialists teach us, when do we start being responsible, for the decisions we make. And Dominic, in this case, I wonder, Emil, if you can give our listeners a little bit of context to we meet Joseph Kony's wife and at least his two daughters, and which is just mind-boggling footage that you were able to access not only some of these people, but getting access to the ICC and the trials themselves. But Emil, can you help our listeners understand a little bit more about the context of the LRA? Uganda's been a difficult, unsettled place for many years. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
So the LRA came about as a response to the oppression of by the current president of Uganda, Joe Museveni, and he was oppressing the Acholi people, and they formed this guerrilla army to fight back. But then it turned out into this, you can call it a Christian cult mixed with like spiritualism and other ideas, and so it went from like, you can call it a legitimate like rebellion into like something more like mystic and cultic. And in fact, it still exists. Joseph Kony, he is still free roaming around somewhere like in the bush, either in Central African Republic or Sudan or Congo. Nobody really knows where he is, but he's still free. But he only has, I think, about 100 people with him at the moment, and they're not fighting in Uganda anymore. The president, the government, and the president army kind of made a great effort to remove them from the scene in Uganda, and they're not really a threat to the northern Uganda anymore.
I can just add that Kony is still there, and also the president of Uganda is the same person for the last 37 years, so the actors haven't changed.
37 years, and I think I love how you, in the film, you really do raise a lot of questions. You brilliantly raise so many questions about oppression, and I love, Emil, that you use that word. We're talking about colonialism. We're talking about the division of Africa back in the late 18th and 19th century, and you know, what are some of the bigger implications? But you don't ever really point the finger at the government, but we certainly have some local people, Ugandans, who are saying, "Hang on a minute here. The crimes committed by Kony and his members, his military, his militia, whatever you call it, are very similar to some of the crimes that some of the government troops have been committing over the past many, many years under the guise of, I don't know what it would be under the guise of, but some sort of moral authority." Lucas, does that sound right to you?
In our film, it was important for us to bring context to this conflict in northern Uganda, because it's very often that conflicts in parts of the world that we don't know about are very simplified, and they are shown as this irrational fights, but people are rational, and this conflict has a very deep background that started actually maybe in colonial times, when one ethnic group was pitted against another one, and that happened in Uganda, where British authorities chose Acholi people to serve in their army, and this army was used to fight other ethnic groups within the border of protectorate of Uganda. And also, what Emil said, LRA also started as a rebellion, like a self-defense rebellion of people in the north. Only after a while it transformed into this cult, but it was important for us to show things in the context, in a more deeper context.
It seems convenient also that I think this whole cult image has been used by the government in Western media to paint the LRA as this crazy army of crazy people, when in fact, it's an army of oppressed and poor and struggling people who had no other person to turn to, and the international community were not giving any aid or help, stepping in or helping. It was a huge human catastrophe with all these camps. The Acholi people were interned in camps by the government under horrible conditions, and many more people died from that than that they were killed by the LRA.
The lawyer Ayena, who's a fascinating character in his own right. I think a film could be made about him and his story. Quite a wonderful guy in his own respect, it seems to me. But he says at least 2 times, maybe 3 times in the film, and it seems to me to be an undertone. Western people, and I think he probably even maybe said white people, need to see Africa, need to see Uganda. And then he gets even more specific. They need to see northern Uganda in a new light, in a new way, in a new perspective. And would you say that the film maybe started out as this historical document and narrative about a trial and so on, but it became much bigger than that, Lucas? Does that make sense? Like, so it's not, you guys don't attack colonialism. You really don't in this film. And it's understated, but it's there. And it's a question that has to be asked.
The film has a couple of layers, and there is this political and more current layer, but Emil and I were always interested in this deeper, more universal or philosophical layer that you can talk about when you talk about this trial. So that was always there for us.
Yeah. What's the other line that he uses? Something about the metaphysical aspects of this case. He even said that, I think, in his closing remarks. Does he not?
We wanted, our film serves in a way as a platform for many different voices. So Aiena speaks about this lack of understanding in the West, but also we give platform to other characters like this Rosalba Oiwa, who is this human rights activist, and she talks about restorative justice. It was for us just really important to put these voices in our film, because they were not heard before, and for most of these people, it was really important to speak up.
Sure. Emil, maybe, I don't know if you want to go here or not, but I'm interested to know a little bit about your religious background. Did that have, or not? Did that have an impact on how maybe the lens that you were wearing, as you directed, as you edited, as you shot footage? Because I mean, we've got the scripture out of the gate, the Old Testament scripture. We have this spiritualistic narrative. There's an occultic narrative. It's fascinating how, and there's a lot of questions embedded here, Emil, but it's fascinating to me when you get to, is Jackson his name? Coney Spiritual Advisor.
Jackson,
I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's unbelievable, the words coming out of his mouth. And I'll leave that as I hope, a catalyst for people to go to see the film. By the way, it's not premiering, but it's going to be at Hot Docs here in Toronto. And you need to see this film. And down the road, I hope you guys get a very wide distribution on this film. But Emil, anyway, there was about 6 or 7 questions, I think, embedded in, but pick one.
I got it. Yeah. No, but I think from the outset, it was crucial for Lucas and I to include Christianity's role in this whole conflict, especially seen in the light of, I think that everywhere where there's oppression, there's like, how do you say, ground for radicalization, and people can take whichever religion they want and use it
Absolutely.
to their purpose. So I don't view it as any different than people taking, the Quran and taking, like Salafists who look at very look at it from the letter, and take it and bring it and living into their life like one-to-one in a way. It's the same as a Chama Jackson who uses Ezekiel to like his
justification,
his guide, or to justify all his actions.
Well, I felt that, and Emil, he says the line, the quote was, I wrote it down, I had to pause the film, because that's how God works.
Exactly.
Are you kidding me?
and I think it's a good example of how you can take any scripture, and turn it into your own propaganda and use it, like to indoctrinate people, and to make them do what you want. And I think that was the strength of Joseph Kony, and he managed to lure a lot of people into this realm of his.
Clearly, I don't even like to use the word charismatic, but clearly there was an appeal there. And when you have that rebellious sort of pushback, that undertone, that political narrative there, it kind of makes sense when you're dealing with a people who, any kind of group, it seems to me, that are oppressed. They're looking for a way out, and as the incremental changes that must have occurred for a man like Dominic to get where he was, it is fascinating to me. It really is on so many levels. Lucas, do you feel that you have a sense? I love too that you bring up restorative justice in the film, and that's coming from a Ugandan perspective. But do you have a sense? Does this make you more cynical about human nature, or do you say, you know what, there is hope? Maybe Dominic is going to see the light in a sense. Maybe we can get. I don't know. Maybe we can piece this together in a new way.
I am actually quite optimistic because Dominic, actually, there are only two people from this whole conflict that are facing trial, and Dominic is one of these two. But thousands and thousands of these former child soldiers, they got amnesty and they don't have to face justice because the scale of atrocities was so big that it was impossible to trial everybody. So the government of Uganda started this clemency program, and they went back to their villages. Of course, they experienced many problems and traumas. There are social problems, but somehow things are moving forward. So I am quite optimistic that it's possible. But I think this restorative justice was a chance that was missed. I think like many people would like to see something like maybe Truth and Reconciliation Committee, like in South Africa. Like this hadn't happened in northern Uganda.
Well, there was certainly an attempt of it in Rwanda, and I remember working in country in Rwanda in a Ruhengeri province and being in a community where I was talking to a woman through a translator and surrounded by mostly men, and her husband had been killed by somebody in their community, and this community was designed for people to supposedly work together towards restoring, this idea of I guess family and relationships and so on. Emil, how about you? I mean, do you have a better sense of what justice really means in a situation like this? I mean, it really is mind-boggling. You start to hear that, what was it, 80 crimes that he was charged with, and you just how does a human being get there?
I mean, I must say, like, making this film has probably confused me even more, or because
sorry, that's I don't mean to laugh, but I'm kind of with you. I'm kind of with you on that.
I think there are so many complexities and so many areas to take into consideration when you talk about justice, and also because there are like these very different perception of justice. I think in the West we have this idea of retribution to kind of punish that, but I think most of us know that it doesn't work. So I think that making the film has opened my eyes to this Ugandan approach, where it's based on forgiveness and reconciliation. And I really hope that people, when they watch the film, that they will think about these ideas and that it will maybe broaden their horizon, and that we can start to discuss, how we will implement justice and maybe look at new ways of doing it.
Well, I love that, and I think it makes so much sense, and I'm so glad again you added that restorative component in. I think at the root of many religions, incredibly violent, right? This old, I'm going to call it this Old Testament kind of punitive notion. Even the idea, what's the theological word? The eschatology is rooted around the day of judgment, right? It's coming. Your hands are going to be cut off too. And I hope that this film gets people in those positions asking questions about the story, the narrative. Maybe we need to look at this in a new way, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. Lucas, did you get a sense that Dominic? I was looking for the line here. I think I found it. He said near the beginning of the film, when the judge is asking him, to make a statement, and he started to try to tell his story, which my heart went out to him at that point. But he said, "I think I deny all charges." Did you get a sense from him at all, as you edited, as you filmed, and so on, that there was a sense of repentance there? Is that the right word?
I'm not sure. It's something that I think Dominic has to face deeply in his heart, in his mind. I think it's also changing for him, judging by how he relate to the charges. because he apologized for causing pain. But I think he really feels also deeply hurt and betrayed because he sees himself as a victim who didn't get help, and he surrendered and was transported to the ICC. And I think that's not the result he expected. So I think there is also a lot of disappointment and bitterness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's probably a very fair response. I mean, how could you not expect otherwise, in a sense? And he must, as he hears some of this, the line of him saying, "I remember, I remember, I remember." What little I know about trauma and PTSD is that sometimes recollection is pushed out, right? And so that's a fascinating question as well.
I can also add that, like, on a human level, if you think about someone like Dominic, who for 5 years, almost every day, was sitting in the courtroom, and many different people were talking about him, and you do it day by day and month by month.
Sure.
Must be like a huge burden to carry.
Oh, and even hearing stuff that you would probably want to stand up and say, "I didn't do that. That wasn't me. I don't remember that," etc. Right?
But also, it's important for us to, we are talking about what he has been accused. It's very important for us not to try to minimize his guilt. We are very clear about all the horrible things, and I think his tragedy it's even bigger because of that, because you can see who he became.
Well, and obviously we want to think about how do we avoid this in the future? How do other countries, how do other political parties avoid these kinds of things? And yet we see very similar things going on in the world today, Syria and the Middle East, and we've got the Ukrainian war and so on. Horrifying things are happening. And I know we have to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, which is unfortunate. I'm hoping we get maybe another opportunity to chat. But Emil, do you think the ICC is broken? I mean, it certainly seems like they're trying one person. Clearly this is some kind of metaphor, but was that a hope of yours that coming out of this film, people would be asking some bigger questions about what does it actually mean to try someone internationally?
Yeah, I guess, again, we're trying to raise some questions, and I think it's up to the audience to make their own conclusions. But of course, at least for me, when working on the film, it was like peeling an onion, and layer upon layer was kind of revealing itself, and I think, like, this kind of limit of the ICC, it is very limited in many ways, because they cannot really investigate crimes and investigate setting precedents in practical terms. And it makes it pretty unfair seen from, like, for instance, the Ugandan perspective. And also, when you go to the ICC website, most of the ongoing situations, as they call them, the ongoing cases, they are set in Africa, and it raises the question, like, why not Bush or Blair or some of the the Western leaders that have been accused of similar crimes? It definitely opened up a Pandora's box for me, and it's some of those questions that we would really like to for the audience to reflect on.
Yeah, and I think most audiences will. I mean, I can't help but get away from the image of maybe it's more than three. I couldn't quite figure out how that was the ICC, those proceedings were working, but you had at least those three older white men in their robes, sort of looking down over the proceedings, and it's the strength of that metaphor is certainly not lost on me. We've got to wrap just in a minute or two. Lucas, do you see coming back to this story for a part two, for a follow-up? Could that be a possibility?
I know that the ICC is seriously trying to find and arrest Connie. Maybe that's part two.
Maybe that's part two. Well, listen, what a pleasure meeting you both. Thank you so much. Are you going to be in Toronto? Or are you coming to the city?
I will be in Toronto.
Fantastic.
I just became a dad, so I'm going to stay.
Well, you better stay home. You have some responsibilities there. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And that's a wonderful time. What a brilliant film. Thank you so much for telling this story, for taking the risk to put it out there. Emil Langbal and Lucas Konapa here talking about their new film, Theater of Violence. It's going to be at Hot Docs. It's the Grand Jury Prize winner at Movies That Matter. Thank you to you both for your authenticity and your openness today here and joining me on Face to Face.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, my conversation with Emil Langbal and Lucas Konapa talking about their film, Theater of Violence, compelling, important, and moving film, touching on so many different issues, and probably, from my perspective, the most important one, restorative justice. What does it actually mean? What does it mean in different cultures? And this idea, once again, of us leaning in a little closer and listening with, mind, body, and soul, and not just sitting on the edge of our seat waiting to provide some sort of, solution. This film really is about understanding context and stepping in. It's about so many other things. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Lucas, for joining me here on Face to Face today. Don't forget, you can see this film at Hot Docs, hotdocs.ca. Check it out. Hopefully, if you're listening post Hot Docs, you'll have an opportunity to see it either at another festival or on a video on demand platform in the not so distant future. So stay tuned for that. And more info about what I do, davidpecklive.com, face-to-facelive.ca. You can get access to a whole slew of many conversations. They're also available on YouTube, but wherever you listen, please do subscribe to Face to Face. We'd appreciate that. Subscribe on YouTube if you're listening/watching. Leave us a thumbs up, and more importantly, we'd love a review. Please leave us a review on iTunes. It all helps. It drives traffic, and it really is remarkable how things can change when people start to pay attention. Thank you so much for listening and for joining us here on the show. The conversation is coming right up. My name's David Peck, and you're listening to Face to Face.